Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly Potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com, digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. Each and every week, we talk about sports topics of local interest, get a national topic or two, maybe mix into the mix. Of course, my favorite part of the podcast where you can ask me a question on any topic, go to the Xverse, hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything. It does not have to be sports related. In fact, we would prefer it's not sports related. Rick, again, this is one of the nicer days to sit outside and do this podcast. We've had this heat wave come through. Today's perfect. And unfortunately, this would be the perfect day for me to go golf. I took a vacation week and I don't have golf scheduled for today.
And instead, you're doing a podcast with me on your patio.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
lovely.
Great.
Well, let's start with the Reds here, Skinny. They went 2-4 since we last talked. They're now 37-43, a half game ahead of the Cubs in fourth place in the NL Central, and 10.5 games back of the first place Brewers. And we'll start with this. After Thursday night's game tonight, as we're recording this, we'll be at the midway point of the season with 81 games played. I know everyone always talks about the All-Star break being the midway point, but this will be the actual midway point mathematically. The Reds are currently 6 games under 500. Who knows what will happen in that 81st game, but complete the following sentence for me. The Reds' first half of the season was blank.
Unfulfilling. I don't want to go disappointing because the injuries, I think, derailed it, but really unfulfilling. I mean, they weren't fun to watch for the most part. You got the unicorn moments from Ellie. You got some nice pitching performances from Hunter Green when he's not puking on the mound, or Nick Lodolo when he's not on the IL. But it was really unfulfilling because I still want to see what this team is when everybody's healthy, and we're never going to find that out this year. You're never going to have all these guys healthy at the same time. And listen, you know this. I mean, you're not going to have your core guys healthy for 162 games of any season. That just doesn't happen anymore. But this season went off the rails from Jump Street, and it's never gotten back on.
Yeah, and that's the part that is tough for me when we're getting this far into the season. And, you know, I know it's just one start, but it's like Graham Ashcraft returns after 3 weeks at AAA and allows 6 runs and 9 hits. It doesn't look very good on Wednesday afternoon, a 6-1 loss. The CES situation, which we're going to talk about here in a second. TJ Friedl came back. He wasn't enough. Now he's back on the IL. McLean isn't due back until September, if at all. Sounding like Williamson might be done for the year. I mean, you still got Marte, but Skinny, it's getting to the point where it feels like, where is the hope supposed to come from for this year's team? Where is the upside left? And like, aside from just saying everyone's going to magically start playing better baseball, there really isn't a lot. It felt like for the first month or two, we were going, well, just hold serve until this guy gets back,
right,
or they get the band back together and they're the Reds we expected. But now, I mean, it just looks like that hope is all but gone.
Yeah, you've been able to piecemeal the infield together for sure. I mean, Candelario started to hit, but now he's dealing with some knee issues, and who knows how bad that's going to. Listen, I will say this much. I don't blame injuries on training staffs. I know other people try to do that. I don't know what they have to do with it other than the ones trying to help them usually recover from some of that stuff. But that said, I don't believe another word David Bell says about injuries. I mean, Nick Lodolo had the blister, and it was he'll be okay to make his next start. And then a day later, he's on the IL. Matt McLean, sounds good. He'll be back pretty soon. This was back in spring training. Oh, no, he's got an oblique, and now still haven't seen him. CES, I still don't know what went on with that situation. I don't think we're ever going to know with that. I mean, it's just been I just don't believe them on injuries any longer, and nor should anybody.
No, it's been silly season when it comes to actually discussing the injuries publicly. Let's talk about CES since we're on that topic right now. He is expected to miss the rest of the regular season now after having surgery on his wrist. Mark Sheldon reported that CES will have the surgery on July 11th and that the recovery time is expected to be 3 months. So, Skinny, what do you have on CES getting hit by a pitch on April 27th and now finally having surgery on July 11th that's going to end his season?
I mean, he was obviously dealing with a prior injury, and I don't know if this exacerbated it or the injury was worse, and this just made it more noticeable when he got hit by the pitch. That's the other part to this. Is as much as I don't believe what comes out of David Bell's mouth when it comes to injuries, some of these players need to start being honest as well. I mean, TJ Friedl's tried to play through hamstring pain, and now he's back on the IL when it finally was proven he couldn't do it. Matt McLean said he could play, and they took him at his word last year. He tried to play through 4 or 5 more games and probably further hurt himself. Christian Encarnacion-Strand didn't know anything about a wrist injury until he got hit by that pitch. And, I've been playing with a wrist injury. Well, I mean, at what point is it on the players to be a little bit more honest with management as well?
I think there's some of that. And I'm with you of CES getting hit on the wrist by a ball has nothing to do with the the training staff getting him ready or
Right.
them not doing their job, right? That's just is what it is. It's kind of a freak event that happened. But you do have to wonder about some of the timelines on these things and the communication between players. And we had that weird moment where they cleared CES to come back. And then he said, no, I'm going to get a second opinion and look into it farther. And then there's just this long delay here all of a sudden. It's like, and maybe that's just CES saying, hey, I don't want to play this year. I'm sitting out the rest of the year. It doesn't feel right. I'm going to wait until I get this surgery done. And the Reds are trying to talk him into not doing that. I don't know. But either way, it's been a very strange situation. And when you couple that with some of the other things we had that you mentioned, like McLean being brought back last year, or them saying he's going to be fine in spring training only to find out he's going to miss basically the entire season. Just something feels off with that whole situation. And again, this goes back to sort of the conversation we had last week about the manager. And it's like everyone always wants to fire the manager every time anything goes wrong. But it's not like there's any really good points of David Bell's career to point to, any high marks to point to and say, well, he did this and that's why he's proven himself. There are a lot of weird things going on now at this point where it kind of just feels like this team is losing its way and this franchise is not in a very good spot. Again, I don't know that any of that's on him or if it should be put on him or how much of it should be, but at some point it just becomes like you're the guy in charge and this is a disaster right now.
Yeah, I mean, and the handful of games of late have not helped his cause at all. I mean, the base running stuff is just a joke. I don't mind aggressive. There's aggressive and there's stupid, and they were stupid in that Saturday game. I mean, just utterly stupid. TJ Friedel breaks for home on a contact play. Why'd you have the contact play on with the infield semi in? You would have had second and third with Ellie being the guy at second. Instead, you're first and second. And what happens on the next go round? Ellie gets picked off second, and then the Fraley decision. I mean. What are we just learning how to run the bases? What are we doing here? And again, that is their MO. I'm fine with that, but there's also times to not be aggressive, which is when it's stupid time to be aggressive.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of the people who want to sort of back David Bell or back the team, the always positive guys that don't want you to say anything negative, will point out to stats that say, well, the Reds are still the best, most aggressive base running team in the major. That's great. That's wonderful. I'm happy that they're doing it. They should continue doing that. That doesn't mean they have to make stupid outs consistently, right? Because they're also doing that. Those two things are not like separate. They're both happening. They're doing a lot of great things on the bases. They're being aggressive. There are also some moments that are happening all too regularly where they're just making boneheaded plays. It's not aggressiveness. It's just they're not locked in. They're not thinking. Like a comebacker to the pitcher, you're not running home on that with the infield in.
Yeah, no. And Stuart Fairchild, I don't know if he thought there was only one out on the one where he's rounding third and trying to score up in Milwaukee and gets gunned out at the plate. One thing Stuart Fairchild has going for him, and he doesn't have a whole lot, is he can run. And instead he's looking over his shoulder at the play, and it costs him some steps. Then he makes the terrible throw home on. I mean, that game on Saturday was just if you ever had a spot where you just go, okay, that's enough. I need a new voice in here. That was the game to me. Like, okay, it's run its course. Again, if I wake up tomorrow and David Bell's the manager, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. If I wake up tomorrow and David Bell's not the manager, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It doesn't move the needle much for me. But at some point, you have to do something. And if front office isn't going to go make a move or two, then you have to have a new voice at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe both. Like, I wouldn't be against that. You definitely need more talent right now based on the lineups they're running.
I mean definitely in the
yesterday, the bottom five guys in that lineup
jerk.
Horrendous. I mean, if you're an opposing pitcher, you're like, all right, good. I've got an easy day. I've just got to get through the first four guys a few times, and I'm going to have myself a game. And that's exactly the way it's played out.
That's the thing. Here's the thing, Rick. And moving forward with this, I've got two outfielders I can believe in at the moment. Moving forward, Spencer Steer, and I don't really consider him an outfielder, but when everybody's healthy, he would be the everyday left fielder. I think we'd agree with that. And Friedel, but right now I can't trust Friedel because starting with late last year, it's the injury bug is starting to bite him a little bit. Who else can you trust in the outfield? So you can't. So you know what you have to do? You don't have anybody in the system at the moment. You have to go make a move for a power hitting outfielder, and it may cost you one of your big chits in the minor leagues. And at this point of the game, I'm fine with that. I'm perfect with that.
But to that point, last year, that's what everyone wanted them to do, right?
But here's the thing. Last year, though, Will Benson was hitting. It turns out to be full. Jake Fraley was hitting. Those guys were hitting. So at that point, it was almost like, all right, well, if these guys are going to pan out, and right now you can see that Jake Fraley was never a great player. The power numbers are silly. I don't get it other than the illness. And Will Benson, looks like he was more or less a 2.5-month flash in the pan, but you didn't really know that.
Exactly. But that was our point last year when we said, look, we're okay with the Reds not making a move right now because you don't know that Will Benson and Jake Fraley are cornerstones of the future for this team. And guess what? They weren't at all. If you had dealt one of your a Noel Marte or a CES or someone like that. Now, I'm not saying they were looking at dealing CES, but if they were looking at dealing one of these other prospects, because you felt like Will Benson was going to be a key cog in your lineup going forward, how stupid would you feel right now about that decision? That's why I'm glad they didn't do it last year when you didn't really know what you had in some of these guys. Now you realize, like, those guys aren't enough. You don't want to deal the Martes, the McLeans, the CESs of the world because you really don't have that much around them in terms of prospects. You need to add something to those key guys. And if that's some younger guys that are, like Reese Hines or whoever that's still in the system that maybe has some value to someone else, great. I'm fine with that. But none of the current guys that we've seen up at the major league level in terms of prospects really should have been dealt at any point and still probably shouldn't.
And the other part to that, though, is if you're not going to make a deal, and again, a lot of this is very fluid because I don't think there's going to be a ton of sellers. There's going to be a lot of people looking to buy here. And maybe you can't pull it off. And I'd like some transparency with that listen, we threw a bunch of things against the wall, just couldn't get anything to stick, couldn't find a trading partner, couldn't find it for the right piece. Then you know what you're going to have to do this offseason? And you've had back-to-back great years of attendance. You need to go buy somebody for a change. And you bought Jamer, and honestly, didn't work out early, but he certainly started to play the back of his baseball card. You need a veteran, power-hitting, right-handed outfield bat, and it's got to be somebody that you go pay for because you don't have it in the system at the moment.
Well, it's kind of going back a little bit. We were talking about some of the weird medical things and just the general chaos that's been happening around this team. What did you think about Hunter Green after he was evaluated by the Reds training staff? He threw up on the mound following a six-pitch walk, issued a leadoff batter, Andrew McCutchen, in the first inning of Tuesday night's game against the Pirates. And that's after he had thrown up the game before that while he was on the mound.
Is he overhydrating? I mean, we hear about, make sure you hydrate. And even when you feel like you're full and you've had too much, because he said, the only way I can get this fluid out of my body is the vomit. Well, I mean, maybe he's overhydrating, and maybe that's either on him or the training staff or whatever regimen he's got, if that's what it's coming to.
Well, that's what he said after the first one, right? It was a hydration issue. And then the second one, he said that wasn't the problem. He was like sick, and now he's taking pills for his stomach or something. But Skinny, something's going on with this team. I mean, this is bizarre. You're watching the guy who's really been one of the bright, shining moments of this season at this point, Hunter Green, on the mound. He walks a guy, the leadoff batter of the game, and then he's just spewing right there on the mound as he's releasing the pitch and then spewing. It was quite the scene. And then they leave him in the game for another few innings and let him get rocked. It was very strange.
Yeah, that's the other part to it. Okay, so if he's sick or he's not feeling well, and you just saw proof positive of it, we've all been there, right? Where you puke and you're like, I can rally. I'm going to be okay. This is, and you're really not. I mean, you're okay for a very short period of time, and whatever the bug it is, or whatever it is, comes back and gets you. And he's trying to pitch through all of that. I mean, what are we doing?
Did you ever play with one of those guys back in high school where they were just the vomit guy? They were just always throwing up.
No. It's funny you say that. I can remember two instances for me. I remember once in 5th grade, I was playing basketball. I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, playing in our grade school league. And for some reason, my mother insisted that I eat dinner right before the game. And it was a tuna sandwich.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh no, it didn't. It came up on the court.
She wanted to get your protein up.
I guess so.
And the other one, no one wanted to guard you man to man closely, though.
They sure didn't. It was probably another high scoring, 16-14 game, as you can only imagine. The other one was, and back in my day of high school, we chewed tobacco. I didn't chew it as much as other guys, and I used to wrap mine in chewing gum, like bubble gum. I read a couple big league players did that. I'm like, okay, because the first time I tried chewing tobacco and put a big wad up there, I'm like, oh, this is gross. So I did it with some gum. I'm like, all right, this isn't so bad. Stole second base and swallowed the chew. And
oh no!
You can just imagine where all that went at some point. Yeah,
you couldn't smell it for the next 2 years of your life, could you?
Could not.
Yeah,
don't think I've taken a little snuff since then in my lifetime, but I've never gone back to full-fledged chewing tobacco.
That'll ruin you.
Oh,
I mean, legitimately. Yeah, I'm not. I puking for me is not. But I remember there were guys who could puke and it was no big deal. It's just like water. They would just be throwing up, running, throwing up, and they just keep doing it during practice or whatever. But I was always like, man, if I threw up, no, I'm not practicing the rest of the day. I'm
done.
a big
Well,
deal to my life.
we used to have our baseball coach used to do it occasionally. We call it the Saturday morning checkup, where if we played like a Friday game and we didn't play well, we'd have to come in and run, and he just lined the garbage cans up. And it did affect some guys, and he was making sure that we didn't get too inebriated the night before was all that was.
Well, yeah, and then they always used to do this. We're going to run until someone pukes, and then
Yes,
they found out
correct.
like actually that's like abuse, and we probably shouldn't be doing that. That's not healthy.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s, no one cared about that, my friend.
Yeah, no doubt. Just wrapping this up, Skinny. Wednesday was the final day of an 80-game suspension for Noel Marte. He's going to be rejoining the team, we think, for the St. Louis series here. He's been at Louisville for the past few weeks. He's posted a 151 average with a 321 OPS, no homers, and 15 strikeouts over 53 at-bats. That's over the course of 12 games. What are you expecting from Noel Marte here?
I would say not much, and I'm not a big, hey, look at rehab numbers guy because, sometimes you're just trying to get timing down and the average doesn't come, but it seems like he's swinging and missing more than he should be. The thing I don't know, and I haven't read this, Rick, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how much, maybe I'm sure he was taking some BP before he went on the rehab assignment, but it's not the same as facing live pitching. And that's a guy that's not facing real live pitching for 3 months, right? I mean, that's a big deal to me.
Well, and I mean, also there's live pitching and there's major league pitching, which are two very different things too. So even if, you're getting your BP in, that's not the same as going in and facing live breaking balls from the best pitchers in the world. It's going to be a hard adjustment. And then, by the way, if he does really well and the Reds make a miraculous comeback, he's not eligible for the postseason either.
I'd like that to be a problem, to be honest with you. I'm sure Reds fans would like that to be a problem as well. One thing I will say is I would much rather see him get some at-bats, and if it doesn't work out, put him back into Louisville and just say, hey, listen, you need a little bit more time. I'd like to throw him in because there's enough Santiago Espinal for me. I've had plenty enough.
Yeah, I've seen that. I'm good on that.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the Reds, Skinny?
The other thing I would say is honestly, and I think this would be a merciful decision, and it worked last year, and who's to say it doesn't work this year? They need to send Will Benson down. I mean, they really do. And when he went down last year, it looked like if you looked at his major league numbers at that point, it looked like this guy's not a major league hitter. He's basically a 4A guy. Well, he came back and lo and behold, he didn't only hit, he hit with power, hit for average, did some really good things over the last 3 months. And it looked like that stint in Louisville did him extremely well. Why can't it do him well again? What's to say it can't do him? I mean, here's the thing. If you send him down for a couple of weeks and he gets it right and he comes back and hits the way he did last year, I don't know if he will or not. You've added a nice piece to the roster for the last couple of months, but if you're going to let him continue to flail up here, you're not doing him any good and you're not doing your team any good.
Yeah, that's the thing. What are you losing by doing that?
Right.
It's not like he's helping you. It's funny because I got,
and I know the answer would be there's nobody to come up, right? But you know what? It doesn't matter. I mean,
again, the replacement level is fine in this case.
Right.
He's horrible right now, and you're right. I mean, he's scuffling so bad that you just got to give him a reset. But I remember last year we were doing the podcast early on, and right before he got sent down, I crushed him. Was just looking at him, he does not look like a baseball player. It is that bad.
He didn't.
He came back and he did great, and I got ripped, and rightfully so. I mean, he was really good when he came back for most of the rest of the year. But I mean, we're right back to what it looked like originally. He has some really bad at bats. Just doesn't look like he knows what he's doing up there.
And now he's pressing, right? Now it's cumulative. Now you're, like I said, we've talked about it. Now you're trying to hit a 5-run homer, and that's not plausible, man. Just get a good AB, and when you're pressing, you're not going to get a good AB. So go down and let him get some good ABs. Maybe get himself right. Realize, okay, mechanically, I'm doing this now by default. I wasn't. Again, you can probably look at all the film you want and go, yeah, mechanically I'm not. But if you don't feel at the plate and you're flailing away, who's it benefiting? It's not benefiting anybody.
He feels like your classic 4A player.
He does. He really does.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for him. And right now it's unfortunate for the Reds because they need anyone to step up and get going. I mean, Jonathan India, to his credit, has gotten it going on the offensive side, but between him and Ellie, it just hasn't been enough outside because they're getting almost nothing else.